We all have these um, baked-in assumptions about how the world works,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the systems that we've all kind of just lived through.
Right, the things we take for granted.
Yeah, exactly. So
Would-
take a second, just picture a school, like right now. Visualize it in your mind. I am willing to bet you instantly saw a very specific uh, architecture. You saw the 180-day calendar. You thought of that long summer break, a teacher standing at the front of a room by a chalkboard or a smartboard.
And probably a heavy textbook sitting on a desk.
Oh, absolutely. A giant, heavy textbook.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels permanent. We treat it like it's this inescapable law of gravity. Like that is just what school is.
Well, we do tend to naturalize the systems we grow up in. I mean, we assume that because the 180-day calendar and the physical textbook have been the standard for, over a century now, they must represent the biologically optimal way to transfer knowledge to a developing human mind.
Right.
We rarely question the fundamental geometry of the classroom, mostly because we're just so busy arguing about what to teach inside of it.
Which is so true. But what if that entire architecture isn't a law of nature at all? What if it's actually just this outdated industrial habit?
Yeah.
And honestly, worse than that, what if that specific structural habit is actively hiding one of the most massive systems of inequality in our society today?
That is the core question we are looking at today.
Yeah, because today we are looking at something that is going to fundamentally challenge how you think about learning, childhood, and really the baseline requirements of a functioning society. We are diving into a provocative framework titled The Educational Commons, AI, and the Mastered Plumb Line.
And it is a remarkably analytical text. I mean, the author doesn't just suggest a few minor pedagogical tweaks or, argue for a slightly better reading curriculum. It essentially demands a complete structural teardown and rebuild of the actual delivery mechanisms of education.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the text uses this metaphor of the plumb line as its anchor.
Yeah.
And in construction, we know a plumb line doesn't flatter the architect.
No, it doesn't care about your feelings at all.
Right. It's literally just a weight on a string. Gravity just tells you if the wall is crooked. So the author uses that to make this pretty brutal point about how subjective our school districts currently are.
Yeah, the beauty of a plumb line is its complete indifference to ego. I mean, if a wall is built leaning slightly to the left, the plumb line doesn't negotiate with the wall.
It doesn't ask the bricks for their opinion.
Exactly. It doesn't ask which brick claims authority. It simply and quietly reveals the objective alignment. And the core thesis of this text is that American education currently lacks a common plumb line.
We're missing the string entirely.
We are. We're trying to build this massive societal house, but we are letting every single district, sometimes every single school, use their own subjective, warped tape measures to lay the foundation.
Wow.
And until we build a common plumb line, we are measuring students on fundamentally crooked foundations. We end up blaming the bricks when the foundation itself was poured on a slant.
That is such a heavy visual. And let's get into the mechanics of that crooked foundation, because the text's first major argument is this really harsh truth about how we actually fund schools. It argues that the old school model, like the one we all went through, it isn't necessarily a failure of individual teachers.
Right.
It actually calls the current system a purchasing lottery. Because right now, school funding is tied largely to local property taxes, which means the quality of a child's education is directly tethered to the real estate value of their zip code.
What's fascinating here is that the phrase purchasing lottery is highly precise because it just completely removes the illusion of meritocracy from the equation.
Right, it's not about who works hardest.
No, not at all. What dictates the quality of the foundation in our current model? It is entirely about district purchasing power. The text lays this out painfully. One district, buoyed by high property values and affluent taxpayers, can afford the newest textbooks, updated science labs with functional ventilation, robust digital subscriptions, state-of-the-art facility.
Everything you could possibly want.
Everything. And right down the road, literally 10 miles away, another district is forced to use textbooks that are 10 years out of date, cut their library purchases, delay critical building repairs, and make impossible choices between academic materials and basic student needs.
I was trying to think of how to visualize this for you listening. Just imagine trying to judge a 100-meter sprint, right? You're the referee at the finish line with a stopwatch. But before the race even starts, one runner is given a pair of carbon fiber, ultra-light, high-tech track shoes.
The best money can buy.
Right. And the other runner is given a pair of heavy, rusted lead boots. The gun goes off, they run, and you look at your stopwatch. Then you look at the crowd and announce that the first runner is simply a biologically superior athlete, and the second runner just didn't try hard enough. We pretend the finish times are a pure, objective measure of their speed.
The light boots analogy gets us halfway there, but the text actually takes it a step further, which is even more damning. It argues that the referee knows about the lead boots, sees them clearly, and ignores them anyway because acknowledging them would require resetting the entire race.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The quote that really captures this is, "That is weighing students on different scales and pretending the numbers mean the same thing."
That's incredible.
Right. Society looks at standardized test scores, graduation rates, college readiness, and we judge these schools and these students as if they all started on the exact same foundation.
We just act like the stopwatch is the only truth. We completely ignore the structural advantages and disadvantages. We just blame the student or we blame the teacher without ever acknowledging that the district's purchasing power dictated the reality of that classroom long before the student even walked through the door.
And if we look at the historical root of that, it's because local control of schools was designed in an era long before advanced standardized national economies. But today, what a district can afford literally becomes what a child is given. Yeah.
That is not an educational standard. That is an economic accident. So the solution proposed in the text is the creation of a calibrated national learning foundation. This is the plumb line. A shared baseline of curriculum, knowledge, and resources that is guaranteed to every single student regardless of their zip code.
Okay, but the moment you say National Learning Foundation, alarms go off for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
The immediate fear is this Orwellian, homogenized classroom where every kid from Maine to Alaska is forced into the exact same mold, reading the exact same localized examples, completely erasing regional culture. It sounds like a fast track to stripping communities of their agency.
The author totally anticipates that exact pushback, and that's why the text makes a vital structural distinction. It proposes a common floor, not a forced ceiling.
A common floor, not a forced ceiling.
Yes. That phrase is the protective mechanism of the entire proposal. It explicitly states that this is not about cultural erasure or mechanically flattening the classroom. I mean, a plumb line doesn't dictate the interior design of the house, right? Right. It just makes sure the floor isn't caving in.
Exactly. So every child gets the exact same world-class foundation in literacy, mathematics, the scientific method, and historical timelines. But local communities are absolutely encouraged to build upon that floor.
Okay, so like a school in a coastal town still adds its marine biology and local maritime history.
Yes.
And a school in an agricultural hub adds advanced agronomy and soil science. Communities still teach their local languages, their tribal knowledge, their specific civic identity. The foundation is mathematically and scientifically guaranteed, but the structure built on top of it remains uniquely local.
Precisely. The text argues we must avoid most historical errors here, because without the common floor, under-resourced districts are trapped beneath the national standard, just drowning in that purchasing lottery.
Yeah.
But if you only implement a forced ceiling, you flatten local identity and alienate parents. So you guarantee the foundation, but preserve the ability to build above it.
But the delivery of that floor is where the logistics get super complicated because, you can't just print a slightly better, thicker paper textbook and mail it to every school in the country. A paper textbook is still an economic trap.
It's obsolete almost immediately.
Exactly. It ages the second it's printed, and it requires massive purchasing power to replace. To actually deliver this floor requires a completely new infrastructure. And that introduces the core operational concept of the text, which is the educational commons.
And we have to be careful not to diminish what the commons actually is. The text explicitly warns that thinking of the educational commons as just online textbooks or PDFs on a screen is far, far too small an idea.
Right. It's bigger than that.
The commons is defined as a shared national digital learning infrastructure. It is a maintained knowledge service.
I really want to spend some time on this because it blew my mind. I remember my 10th grade history textbook still listed the Soviet Union as an active country.
Oh.
And this was in the late 90s, like well after the Berlin Wall fell.
Yeah.
But the idea of a textbook as a frozen object is something we've just totally accepted. A district buys a biology textbook in, say, 2018. It sits on a shelf. But out in the real world, biology is exploding.
Right. CRISPR gene editing becomes standard.
Exactly. mRNA vaccines are deployed globally. Our entire understanding of the human microbiome shifts. But the student sitting in a classroom in 2026 is holding a book from 2018. The field changed, But the knowledge in the student's hands is literally frozen in time.
The mechanism of textbook adoption forces this reality. Districts are trapped in these 10-year adoption cycles, basically waiting for local tax revenues to replenish enough to allow them to buy the next edition.
Just waiting for the budget to catch up.
Right, and errors remain in the text for a decade. And again, the purchasing lottery rears its head here, right? Because wealthy districts buy the supplemental digital updates and poorer districts fall further behind the scientific consensus. The physical book literally becomes a monument to unequal purchasing power. The educational commons, structurally, turns the curriculum into something that is alive.
A living curriculum.
Yes. A maintained service can be version tracked, corrected, and updated continuously by a consortium of subject matter experts. It connects the student not just to what was known when a printing press rolled 10 years ago, but to what is scientifically and historically established right now.
The text actually breaks this future curriculum down into two distinct layers, which I found fascinating because it balances the need for stability with the reality of new discovery. So the first layer is what they call the stable foundation. This is the durable, time-tested knowledge.
The things that don't change.
Yeah. It's arithmetic, geometry, grammar, the core timeline of history, the basic steps of the scientific method.
This layer is deliberately slow-moving. It does not change impulsively based on fads. As the text notes, cognitive science shows that children need sequence to build schema, teachers need structure to organize a year, and society needs a common educational grammar. We don't need to rewrite the rules of algebra every Tuesday.
Wait, 2 plus 2 is always 4.
Exactly. The stable foundation provides the anchor.
But then you have the second layer, which the text calls the living frontier. And this is where the textbook stops being a dead object. This is where students encounter the field as it is actually developing in real time.
The operational examples the text provides are deeply illustrative here. Let's trace a biology student in this system. From the stable foundation layer, they learn the fundamental structure of a cell-like mitochondria, nucleus, cell membrane.
Basics.
Right. That architecture hasn't changed, but simultaneously, through the living frontier layer, that same student is exposed to current active research in regenerative medicine or synthetic biology that was perhaps published just 6 months ago.
Or in civics, right.
Yeah.
The stable foundation gives you the structure of the Constitution, the 3 branches of government, the concept of federalism. But the living frontier has you reading and analyzing ongoing Supreme Court cases or tracking a piece of public policy as it currently winds its way through a state legislature.
And in history, you learn the core chronological timeline, say the major events of World War II, but the living frontier connects you to newly declassified, digitized archives that were just released to the public. Or maybe a recent archaeological finding that is currently forcing historians to reinterpret a past event.
It's incredible.
The mechanism here is vital. The student isn't just memorizing a dead pile of subtle facts. They are observing how human understanding actually grows. They see the disputes, the peer review process, the settled foundations, and the active frontiers.
It changes the student's relationship to knowledge entirely. It shows them that science and history are verbs, not just nouns.
Yes, it creates active participants rather than passive receptacles.
Okay, but let's pause here and enter some messy reality because you and I both know the math of human capacity breaks down at this exact point.
It certainly does.
If knowledge is constantly updating like this, especially in fields like AI, medicine, technology, and law, how can we possibly expect one human teacher to monitor a living curriculum of cutting-edge genetics while managing 30 kids with different reading levels?
You can't.
I mean, a teacher already has to grade papers, manage behavior, handle IEPs, write lesson plans, and deal with administration. Now we expect them to be a real-time curator of the living frontier of knowledge. That's physically impossible.
It is entirely physically impossible, and the text doesn't shy away from that. It leans into it. The author is very clear. You cannot maintain a living curriculum, a constantly updating frontier of knowledge, relying solely on the physical bandwidth of a single human being in a room of 30 students. The cognitive load is simply too high.
Yeah, they would burn out in a week.
Exactly. To maintain this system, you require an entirely new type of instructional engine.
Which brings us to the part of the framework that will inevitably cause the most friction, I think. Confronting institutional ego and the introduction of the AI faculty layer. And wait, before we even explain what it does, just introducing AI as faculty means you're immediately going to hit a wall of political gridlock, teachers' unions protecting jobs, and parents who are already terrified of their kids getting more screen time.
The text acknowledges that friction, absolutely, but it pushes past the superficial debate. It argues that the current acceptable framing of artificial intelligence in education is incredibly timid, precisely because it is trying to appease those adult political realities.
Right.
Right now, the acceptable narrative is that AI should merely assist teachers. It should help them write lesson plans or maybe grade multiple choice tests, but the human faculty must remain permanently above it in the instructional hierarchy.
And the text calls this out so aggressively. It says this timid framing protects the old hierarchy before it asks what actually serves the student. It assumes the most important thing is preserving the adult status as the sole purveyor of knowledge.
The philosophical core of this section is a hard pill for many to swallow, but it is profound. The text states, quote, "The child's education matters more than the adult's status position." If we truly believe in building the most accurate, equitable, continuously updated educational plumbline, we cannot let professional pride or bureaucratic gridlock dictate the limits of a child's learning.
Because let's look at the mechanics of what AI can actually do in a classroom setting right now, let alone in 5 years. The text lists these tasks. An AI instructional layer can explain fractions to one student who learns best visually.
Yes.
At the exact same moment, it can explain Shakespeare to another student by drawing comparisons to modern narrative structures they already understand.
Yeah.
It can teach cell division to a third.
And it does all of this simultaneously, which is the operational bottleneck of the traditional classroom. A human teacher, just by the laws of physics, must teach to the middle of the room, hoping the advanced kids don't get bored and the struggling kids don't drown. An AI instructional layer detects that a student struggling with high school algebra is actually failing because they missed a specific, localized prerequisite in fraction multiplication 3 years ago.
And crucially, the AI doesn't shame them for it.
No.
It doesn't sigh. It doesn't look at its watch. It just provides the practice. It can slow down without irritation. It can repeat a concept 50 times without building up resentment. It can translate instantly for an ESL student, matching their exact dialect. It can update its knowledge base overnight to reflect a new scientific consensus.
As the text says, that is not a minor classroom aid. That is the emergence of a new educational faculty layer. If AI becomes a better explainer, a more precise diagnostician, and a better customizer of curriculum than the average human instructor, the system has a moral obligation to the student to deploy it.
But let's clarify the role of the human here, because the immediate dystopian fear is that we are just firing all the teachers, plugging kids into glowing screens in windowless rooms, and calling it the future. The text takes a massive forceful stance against that. This is not about replacing humans. It's about role clarification.
Right. The text states unequivocally that human dignity does not depend on humans always being better than machines at direct, rote instruction. Human beings remain profoundly essential, but their role shifts to what human beings are uniquely capable of doing.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I thought of it like this. Think about a calculator. A calculator vastly outperforms the human brain at long division.
Obviously.
But the invention of the calculator didn't abolish the mathematician. It freed the mathematician from tedious arithmetic so they could focus on higher-level theory and conceptual physics. Or think of a telescope. It sees millions of light years farther than the human eye, but it doesn't make the astronomer meaningless. AI doesn't abolish the teacher. It frees them to actually be human.
That analogy holds up really well here. The author explicitly details the mechanisms of human value in this new paradigm. The adults in the building are needed for embodiment, care, physical safety, social development, mentorship, moral formation, conflict resolution, and basically curating the living environment of the school.
Kids need adults to notice if they're looking depressed.
Exactly.
They need someone to help them navigate the messy reality of an argument with a friend in the hallway. They need to play sports, make art, and experience human belonging. The text says the AI does the direct cognitive instruction, but humans guide the living social environment.
And as the author puts it, that is not dehumanization, that is role clarification. But deploying this AI layer requires an incredibly strict approach to governance, because if we are going to rely on an AI faculty layer to deliver this common plumb line, we run into a severe equity issue regarding who actually controls the algorithms.
Right, because if this educational commons is just handed over to a single, massive, private tech vendor, say OpenAI or Google or whoever wins the market, then we haven't solved the problem at all. We have just replaced textbook inequality with what the text calls algorithmic inequality.
Precisely. If the foundational layer is privatized, the wealthy district in the suburbs will just use their tax base to buy the platinum premium AI tutor with perfect reasoning capabilities and zero latency. And the under-resourced district will get the free, ad-supported, hallucination-prone version that sells student data to third parties. We are right back in the purchasing lottery, just digitized.
So how does the text actually propose we govern this? What is the mechanism to prevent corporate monopolies from owning the minds of students?
The text argues that the educational commons must be treated as public interest infrastructure. Think of the governance model like Wikipedia crossed with the open source software community, but heavily fortified. It cannot be one tech CEO in Silicon Valley tweaking the AI's parameters.
It has to be public.
Yes. It must be governed by a consortium of public universities, state librarians, and subject matter experts who are constantly peer-reviewing the model's outputs. The foundation itself must be auditable, transparent, version-tracked, and rigorously tested for bias by public entities. The AI instruction must be part of the guaranteed common floor, not another luxury layer for those who can afford it.
If we actually manage to build this shared AI floor with transparent governance and a living curriculum, it completely blows up how we grade kids today, doesn't it? Because right now, let's be honest, a standardized test is basically just a poverty metric.
It absolutely is. And the text defines this phase of the shift as diagnose before you condemn. This is a profound change in the mechanism of assessment. Right now, standardized testing acts as a blunt instrument. A test score comes back in the mail, and it says School A scored highly and School B scored poorly. But the score alone is completely silent on the why.
Yeah, if a student fails a state math test right now, all we see is a red F. We don't know the causal chain. Did they fail because the district's curriculum was 10 years out of date? Did they fail because they had a long-term substitute teacher who wasn't trained in math? Did they fail because the roof of the school is leaking and the heating is broken? Or, and this is where it gets incredibly dark, did they fail because they hadn't eaten since yesterday?
Standardized tests currently measure the cumulative effect of a student's entire socioeconomic reality, and then the system pretends it is purely a measure of academic effort or intelligence. But if we connect the plumb line concept back to measurement, it isolates the variables.
Because every single school is using the exact same baseline architecture. They all have the same AI diagnostic layer and the same living curriculum.
Exactly. When the foundational inputs are equalized, the outputs become mathematically legible. The system can finally locate the gaps with diagnostic precision. The AI can see, this student didn't fail because they're incapable. They failed because they missed a specific prerequisite in third grade, and the AI can provide that module today.
Wow.
Or aggregate data might reveal, wait, an entire demographic of students is struggling with this specific concept, which means the curriculum module itself is poorly designed and needs to be rewritten by the consortium.
Or it reveals the limits of digital tools entirely.
Yeah.
If the AI is providing world-class individualized instruction, and its curriculum is constantly updated, but a student is still consistently failing, well, it points directly to the physical reality of the child. It tells the human faculty that this might be a health problem, a severe food insecurity problem, or a home stability issue.
Right.
The text says tests stop being tools of humiliation and become tools of precise diagnosis.
Diagnose before you condemn. You cannot honestly call a school failing when it was never given the same tools as the wealthy school across the state. The plumb line exists to make the truth visible, not to flatter or shame.
And this brings us to the economics of it all, and the physical reality of the school building itself. Because going digital and deploying national AI infrastructure isn't free.
Not at all.
Server farms cost money, AI compute costs money, cybersecurity is incredibly expensive. But a shared national digital commons drastically reduces the massive localized waste of 10,000 different school districts, all independently negotiating duplicated textbook purchases, hiring localized IT consultants, and managing fragmented software subscriptions.
The redundancy in the current system is staggering. There will be substantial financial savings at the local district level when they stop repurchasing the same static knowledge every few years. But the text issues a crucial non-negotiable mandate regarding those savings.
This is key.
The money saved on the digital infrastructure must not vanish into administrative bloat, and it must not be used to justify municipal tax cuts. It must be aggressively redirected into the living, physical needs of the schools.
The takeaway here isn't just school needs to change digitally. It's that educational inequality isn't purely a teaching failure, it's an accounting and resource allocation failure. And this is the part of the blueprint that completely destroys the argument that AI will lead to kids locked in sterile pods.
Yes.
The text lists exactly what these district savings must be spent on: school lunches, universal breakfasts, mental health counselors, HVAC repairs, arts programs, sports equipment, music rooms, physical wet labs, and outdoor learning spaces.
Because the child is not just a brain in a jar absorbing digital inputs. As the text states, the child is a biological body, a citizen, and a developing person. The cognitive science is unambiguous. Hungry children do not learn the same way fed children do. Students in physically unsafe, decaying buildings with poor air quality do not absorb knowledge the same way as students in stable, beautifully designed facilities.
The text paints this incredible picture. It says the digital commons carries the curriculum spine, so the physical school can finally become the living body. A nation shouldn't use AI as a cheap excuse to defund physical schools or isolate kids in screens. We use the AI to handle the heavy cognitive lifting of individualized instruction, and we use the money we saved on buying biology textbooks to make sure every kid has a hot meal, a full-time school nurse, and a functioning theater program.
It's a total integration of cutting-edge digital equity with deep traditional human care. The textbook updates, the AI adapts, the assessment diagnoses, but the human teacher guides, the physical building supports, and the child develops physically and socially. It is a holistic vision.
Okay, but it's not just the materials and the funding we're wasting in the current system. It's the actual calendar. And this sets us up for what is arguably the most mind-bending part of this entire deep dive.
Yes, the math here is shocking.
If you thought attacking textbooks and human instructional limits was radical, wait until we look at the clock. The text pivots hard here to attack the traditional 180-day school year. It calls it a leftover industrial habit.
Which is historically accurate. The agrarian calendar, the industrial factory shifts, these historical realities shaped a school calendar designed to accommodate harvests and factory rhythms that no longer dictate modern family life. We have simply accepted it unquestioningly.
Yeah, we don't need kids to go work the fields in July anymore.
No, we don't. But the text asks a fundamental structural question. Why should education disappear for months at a time during a long summer dead zone when the child's mind, the modern economy, and the research world do not simply starve?
I want to walk through the math on this slowly, because when you lay the math out, it's actually incredibly sobering. We are actively choosing to waste years of a person's life just because we won't update a calendar. Let's break this down to feel the sheer scale of the wasted time.
Please do. The mathematics of the current calendar are staggering when viewed objectively.
Okay. A standard calendar year has roughly 260 weekdays. The current American school model uses about 180 of those days for instruction. We take weekends off, obviously, because everyone needs rest. The text isn't suggesting we turn childhood into a 247 grind.
Of course not.
Well, let's look at the weekdays we're just leaving on the table. The text proposes two models to reclaim this time without burning kids out. Let's look at Model A first.
In Model A, we move to a full-year rhythm.
Right. Instead of a massive, jarring 3-month summer break where kids forget half of what they learned, we give them 1 week off per quarter. That's 4 weeks off a year, or 20 weekdays of vacation. If you subtract those 20 days from the 260 weekdays, you have 240 instructional days.
Compare that to the current 180-day model. You've just added 60 extra instructional days every single year while still giving regular, predictable breaks.
Exactly. 60 extra days. Now, multiply that 60 days across the 13 years of K-12 education. 60 times 13 equals 780 extra instructional days over a child's school career. Now, divide those 780 days by our standard 180-day school year. You get 4.3.
4.3 traditional school years recovered.
That is insane.
Simply by adjusting the calendar to a balanced, full-year rhythm.
Over 4 years of educational capacity currently being thrown away.
Yeah.
We act like 13 years of K-12 is a law of nature, but it's just a byproduct of a calendar with a massive summer dead zone.
Exactly.
But wait, let's say people think 1 week off a quarter is too harsh. Parents might want more flexibility. Let's look at Model B, a more moderate approach.
In Model B, we give students 2 full weeks off per quarter. That is 8 weeks of vacation a year, or 40 weekdays off. 260 weekdays minus 40 leaves 220 instructional days. That is still 40 extra days a year compared to the current system.
Okay, let's do the math again. Multiply those 40 days across 13 years, and you get 520 extra instructional days. Divide that by 180, and you still recover 2.9 traditional school years. Nearly 3 full years of learning potential reclaimed while still giving kids 2 solid weeks off every single season.
It completely shatters the illusion of the K-12 pipeline. We act like 13 years of schooling is biologically necessary for a human brain to mature to a high school graduate level. But it's not a biological law. It is merely a byproduct of a calendar with a massive summer dead zone. The system hides time.
Yeah, it scatters it.
It scatters it into summer breaks, delays, and the inevitable weeks of September review, and then acts as if a student must remain in the K-12 pipeline until they are 18 simply because the calendar says so.
And the cognitive science backs up how damaging this is, right?
Yeah.
We talk about the summer slide or academic drift.
Hmm.
What actually happens to a child's brain over 8 to 10 weeks of zero academic engagement?
Cognitively, neural pathways related to complex problem solving and structured recall begin to prune when not utilized. Teachers spend the first month to 6 weeks of every new school year simply reteaching what the students forgot over the summer. But the sociological impact is even more profound than the cognitive one.
Right, because that summer dead zone is actually a massive driver of inequality. We treat summer like it's this universal idyllic break for everyone, but the reality is deeply fractured by class.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is arguably one of the most insidious mechanisms of inequality we have. Sociologically, what happens in July and August? Wealthy families fill that summer dead zone with intense enrichment. They send their kids to STEM coding camps, intensive theater workshops, international travel, and private tutoring. Their children are in safe environments with stable, nutritious meals and constant cognitive engagement.
And for poorer families, they don't have the disposable income for a $1,000 a week coding camp. Both parents might be working double shifts, so the kids are home alone trying to entertain themselves.
Exactly. For children from under-resourced homes, the summer break often means severe academic drift, lack of structure, isolation, and tragically, food insecurity, because millions of children rely entirely on school lunches for their daily caloric intake. The long summer break actively widens the gap between the rich and the poor every single year. A full-year rhythm with shorter, quarterly breaks keeps knowledge warm. It preserves cognitive continuity. It ensures that vulnerable children have consistent, year-round access to meals, physical safety, and social engagement.
The text phrases it perfectly. The wealthy child's summer becomes enrichment. The poor child's summer becomes academic drift. By moving to a full-year model, we aren't just doing accounting tricks to save time, we are establishing time equity. We are keeping the engine running so kids don't have to spend September and October relearning what they forgot in July.
Which leads us to the final structural leap in the text. Because when you combine an AI faculty layer providing individualized, perfectly paced instruction with a full-year calendar that reclaims 3 to 4 years of time, the central metric of education fundamentally changes.
We stop measuring seat time and we start measuring mastery.
Precisely. The old mechanism of education says, remain in this grade, sitting in this specific seat until the calendar year ends. It doesn't matter if you mastered the material in October and are now bored out of your mind, or if you were hopelessly lost by November and are just surviving until May. You move when the calendar dictates.
The new model says, move forward when you have mathematically and diagnostically proven you are ready. And this is where the implications get wild. Because if we reclaim those 3 to 4 years of time from the calendar, and kids can learn at their own accelerated pace with AI tutors that never tire out, students could realistically complete the entire K-12 plumbline foundation by the time they are 14, 15, or 16 years old.
And we must emphasize, not every student will finish at 14. The text is very careful to avoid turning this into an accelerated pressure cooker. Some students will need more time to grasp concepts, and the AI will patiently provide it without penalty. But for the millions of students who are ready earlier, the system will no longer imprison their readiness inside an arbitrary calendar. The purpose of school isn't to hold teenagers hostage in a building until they turn 18.
But let me push back here, because if you've got a 15-year-old who just finished high school, what do we do with them? The text explicitly warns against throwing 14 or 15-year-olds out into the brutal adult labor market. We aren't trying to bring back child labor in the factories.
No, absolutely not.
And honestly, if a district is strapped for cash, isn't there a huge danger here of what we could call cheap acceleration? Couldn't a district just artificially lower the passing grade, stamp mastered on a 14-year-old's forehead, and shove them out the door just to clear a seat and save a buck? How do we prevent this from becoming a conveyor belt of underprepared kids?
That is the most vital stress test of the entire theory, and the text addresses the mechanics of it directly. This is precisely why the entire system relies on the very first concept we discussed, the calibrated plumbline.
Oh, right.
Without a national objective plumbline, early graduation is arbitrary, dangerous, and easily manipulated by local budgets. But with the shared assessment architecture and the AI diagnostic layer, a student is not accelerated just because a district administrator wants to save money. They advance because the system mathematically verifies true mastery against a rigorous, unbending national standard.
So the AI has version tracked every single concept they've learned over a decade. It knows they actually understand calculus and civic structures. It isn't guessing, and the local principal can't override the data just to push them out.
Exactly. The mechanism protects the student from being pushed out unprepared, and it protects the integrity of the public standard. The text provides a motto for this: raise instructional quality so students can meet standards sooner rather than lowering standards to move them faster. That is the difference between cheap acceleration and genuine mastery.
Okay, so that prevents the cheap acceleration, but we still have a 15 or 16-year-old who has mastered the foundational floor. What happens to them?
The text calls the next phase the bridge to higher formation. Because the state has shortened the K-12 pipeline by several years, they are no longer spending tens of thousands of dollars keeping a 16-year-old in a high school seat learning material they've already mastered. The state takes those massive operational savings and reinvests them into publicly funding the next stage of education.
This is the genius of the resource reallocation. A 15-year-old completes the K-12 plumb line. They have verified mastery over literacy, math, science, and civics. They then cross this publicly funded bridge. Without taking on a single penny of crushing student debt, they enter a highly specialized trade program to become an electrician, or they enter an agricultural tech program, or nursing prep, or they dive into advanced AI systems and cybersecurity, or they begin early college courses for engineering.
Early graduation does not mean societal abandonment. It means earlier access to higher specialized development. The goal is to stop wasting the prime cognitive years of human potential and to build a continuous, publicly supported pathway from foundational literacy all the way to advanced societal contribution.
So what does this all mean? The takeaway here is so clear. If we fix the calendar, we fix the textbook purchasing cycles, the teaching and the learning naturally elevate. We're talking about moving from a system that asks, what can this local tax base afford, to a system that demands, what should every child be structurally guaranteed?
That is the paradigm shift.
We are shifting away from protecting institutional ego and moving toward building the straightest possible plumb line for the student. The operational mandate is sequential. First, build the plumb line. Guarantee the common floor via the AI Commons. Then, measure honestly to isolate the variables. Then, use the savings to feed the children and expand the physical beauty and humanity of the schools.
And if we manage to execute that sequence, we open up possibilities that are almost hard to fathom from our current constrained vantage point. Which leaves us with a final structural thought to consider.
Yeah?
If we truly implemented this educational commons, if we successfully reclaimed 4 years of educational capacity and fundamentally separated learning from the rigid constraints of a zip code and an industrial 180-day calendar, how would that reshape the entirety of human adulthood?
It's wild to think about.
Imagine a generation of citizens entering the adult world at 16 or 17. They are fully grounded in a stable, rigorous foundation. They are completely debt-free because the public bridge funded their advanced trade or college training. And they are natively partnered with an AI faculty layer to continuously navigate the living frontier of knowledge. If we unleash a generation with that much recovered time, that much equitable foundation, and that much technological fluency, what grand global challenges could that generation solve that we, currently trapped in our slow, unequal calendars, can't even comprehend?
When you look at it like that, you realize the 180-day calendar, the frozen textbook, and the summer slide aren't gravity at all. They're just the walls we happened to build a long time ago. And maybe it's time we finally check those walls against a plumb line. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the educational commons. Keep asking the big questions about the foundations you stand on. We'll see you next time.